is thinking about how do you build an organization that is sustaining. I've been looking at various different projects that happens on my campus, and I see there'll be like a project that people will get really excited about, and people will be dedicated towards it. And in maybe it's 4 months or a year, people just lose interest, right? And they are no longer part of it, and they don't really care. It's something that they're just like, oh, this is awesome. And then for some reason it dies out. And, this is a really important problem that you have to think about, particularly if you're starting something that's new and you don't know how people are going to perceive this particular thing and you want to sort of sustain it for the long run. I think what you got to think about is how do you build community such that you can remove yourself from the situation and everything is going to be fine and self-sustaining? And that's like a really hard thing to do, and you have to actively think about that. Is that if you are building something, right? Like you're the founder, you need to actively try to figure out, okay, I want to take a step back and I want to remove myself from the situation. How is this going to sustain itself without you? And, the secret, I think, is persistence is the first thing is making sure that you are investing in assets that are persistent, regardless of what you're doing. So, I mean, obviously there'll be a change when the founder is not there anymore, but the key thing is looking for these assets that are very persistent. So one of them being, culture, and making sure that people understand what the mission is, or they're excited behind it, and really focusing on that culture, of what that actually is, right? So just getting people fired up around an idea, right? Like some sort of, I think Collins, he's sort of this business guru from many years ago, called it a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Like something that is you can't really solve, like poverty, for example, but it's got to be like not only poverty, you can't solve that. That's not something that's ever going to go away, but it's like specific to where people actually see it, right? So it might be poverty in a specific location that, the community gets why you're trying to do that. And you getting people sort of fired up about this is super hard to do that, right? Like you see things that sort of flare up, and it's a cool project temporarily for a few years, and people are no longer involved and they don't care. That is one thing that I think is really important, is having that sort of having a culture, or where people are just fired up behind something, right? And they kind of get it. It resonates with them. They're sort of passionate about it. The other thing is to think about technology that is persistent, that stays around for a long time. I'm specifically thinking about things like YouTube videos, for example, right? Like there's some um, social media, there's some technology that is persistent, right? Like blog posts, for example. Those are pretty persistent, and they don't disappear quickly. And they might be, become out of date, but they're still there. And, thinking about the sort of evergreen stuff that is there for a long time, that is really, really important. There's other aspects that might be persistent, um, that you might think about. For example, having family. It's being a family business, or it's like a lot of these things are very, you can't replicate it in any sort of way. So that's why it's very interesting to see where companies go from not just a small business that's around for a while, but that are around for a long time, and that they clearly are, people understand what they're about, right? Without the founder, it's there, it's not going to die out, and it's a challenging, difficult thing to do to make that transition. the other thing that I question and think about is like, do you actually need that all the time? Right? Like, is that something that you should have? Is to think about longevity and survival? Um, I don't know. I think like depending on the context, it's good to have longevity of businesses, but depending on there's other contexts, you might not want to do that. You might want to have sort of semi-modular, disposable organizations that appear and disappear. The question of why they should stay around, it really revolves around, I mean, the best possible explanation that I can explain is that it's just cheaper to have them around than having any sort of market assembling that happens, right? So that's the transaction cost argument, where it'd be easier to sort of put these things together, right? Um, and you can do that. So the challenge is really thinking about what is that particular thing that people are really passionate about, and then finding it so that it sort of persists and create that sort of self-reinforcing mechanism where it will keep going regardless of what you're doing. And not only that sort of self-reinforcing mechanism, but like a positive reinforcement that happens where it will continue to grow and get better without it. And I struggle with this in terms of, or without the person that found it, I struggle with it because so much depends on the founder and what people actually do. Um, Right, like a lot of things just die out when nobody is there. I would say the majority of things just die out when there's somebody that's not pushing it because people just don't care, right? Like people are very, very self-interested and they just don't care. So, finding that combination and it might be another situation might be just to find somebody else that cares just as passionately as you do, but that might be a 1 in a 10 million sort of circumstance where that might happen, right? It's not even 1 in a million, it's probably 1 in 10 million. It's like winning the lottery. And so I think like the only thing you could do is just keep working at it and sort of um, showing how that this can have some long-term potential. And so I think, definitely, excuse me, training and that aspect of it and having somebody around for a long time that you can build trust is definitely a key part. But what's going to happen over the long run, that really is thinking about the all these sort of subtle things that they they need to be around to sort of create this sort of scenario where it's going to persist and actually grow and reinforce over time. It's not as easy as you might think, because it requires so many things to go right that it will continue to grow and continue to actually prosper into something. So that's my thoughts. I think it's interesting. It's a perplexing problem, but I that there's always a lot to learn about. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.